Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Couples Corner, a place where couples can come to connect. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Katie Lemieux, a licensed marriage and family therapist here in sunny South Florida, and this is my co-host, colleague, and friend.
Of course. I'm Susan Block, and I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist here in sunny South Florida in Coral Springs. And Katie and I both have private practices, and we are very passionate about working with couples.
Excellent. And so today's guest is Jessica Jefferson, and she is actually a very special guest because not only is Jessica a friend, a colleague, but I also have another company called K2 Visionaries, and Jessica does all of our marketing. So if you're a therapist and you're familiar with that, all the marketing is done by Jessica, and she does an amazing job, and we're so grateful for her. So I just wanted to give her a little shout out about that. But Jessica's actually going to talk to us today about military couples. And, you know, military couples have their own issues and unique problems that they come with, and so she's going to be sharing tips about how military couples can kind of, bridge the gap of whatever they're dealing with.
Well, and I think this is such a special little area that you work with, and so I'm really fascinated about what you do specifically with working with couples as well as military couples. Can you tell us how you got started?
Yeah, so specifically with military couples, I come from a military family. Okay. So my mom's served for over 25 years. She retired a couple years ago. Stepfather, uncles, cousins, family. I immersed in the military culture. And through that, you sort of learn that military families and couples, they go through the same issues, but on a higher level. They have a lot of other issues that sort of are added on to that.
Sure.
So I became fascinated with working with military couples because I have that knowledge and background about the things that they go through. So I figured it would be an extra tool to help them connect and get those resources that are definitely needed for them.
Excellent. So share with us some of the tips that you have for our audience.
So some of the tips is, especially for military families and couples, is to create a structure. Sometimes you go through deployment, you get stationed to other places, your spouse or partner may be stationed and you might not be with them. So creating a structure is always important, especially when you have kids. You want to have a structure from when the service member is there and from when the service member leaves. Because oftentimes when they return, they have a hard time finding their role and their place back in the family. So if you create that beforehand, it becomes an easier transition for when they come back.
Yes.
So it helps them connect better with the family.
That's a really good thing. I think all couples and families need structure, but as you said, you know, working with military families, it's really important to have that in place so that when they are deployed and then they return home, that's already in place. So I love that. Yeah. What else can you share with our audience?
So sometimes service members have the fortunate timeline of when they will get deployed, sometimes they don't. So I always think of creating memories before they leave.
I love that.
But not leaving with them. I think if the partner who's back at home can send them like little snippets as they go along, just say, hey, I'm thinking of you in the time we did this, and care packages and things like that, letting the service member know they're thinking about me, because it's hard to communicate, it's hard to connect. You don't know when you can Skype or FaceTime, you don't know the different time zones. So these are little trinkets that they can do while they're being deployed, because they can be deployed 1 year, 2 years, it can be extensive. So having these little hints and memories of things to connect is always a good thing to do.
I think it's always nice getting a care package anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, who gets those anymore? And I think that goes back to tip number one, is you're talking about just creating the structure beforehand so you know what it is. So I really love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's also, again, it's also good with kids, have memories with their parent before they leave so that they can have that connection.
And it's also giving the kids a sense of control over a very uncontrollable situation. You know, they can participate, they can, you know, let's mail mom this, or let's mail dad, you know, this memory that we made a couple months ago. And so it really gets them involved and keeps them a little bit more in control.
Yeah, because it's very hard for spouses and children. You're sort of placed in, I remember when I was a kid, I always had to move every 4 to 5 years, and it sucked. And I didn't get it, I didn't understand it. And as an adult, you sort of begin to appreciate it, but as a kid, it's very hard to be like, I have to leave my friends again. I have to be the new kid in school. So so having sort of control and sense and connection of what it means to be a military brat, or however you want to phrase it, it gives them that at a sense of connection.
No, I love that. Yeah. Great tips. So what else can you suggest to the military couples and families that are watching?
Build resources. Like I said, you tend to move a lot. So if you find other spouses, other partners in the area, sort of the connect. Create your own military Army wife situation going on is always important because it is very lonely. And you don't want to become overly dependent on your partner because your partner can be deployed and then you're by yourself. So creating sort of a connection and a community as you move along is always important because sometimes you move away from family, you move away from friends. So creating connections within your community is always important.
So that's interesting because on another one of our episodes, our guest was talking about the freedom and independence and really finding a balance in the relationship.
Right.
So especially in military couples is when one person is gone, is you do have to have other resources and other supports, but also honoring that when you're together and when you're apart, and finding that right balance. Nice.
Yes, because it's important to have that service member feel connected when they return because they have been essentially by themselves for a long time. So you don't want to become too overly dependent or too overly independent. So finding that right balance is important.
And what I'm hearing you talk about is really something I think that all couples should be doing. You know, really being very present and being very mindful of setting structures so that it creates healthy boundaries and it creates those roles that you talked about before they're deployed. And this is really a great opportunity for couples to just implement these things so that they know what their roles are and what the expectations are.
And for military families, it's very easy to create structure because the military is very structured in itself. So they're kind of used to that already. So it's just implementing it in the home is a good way.
I love that you say that because a lot of times what I find as a therapist is we have these great resources as people, but it's like we only see them in this context, right? And so what you're identifying is saying, hey, you already have structure somewhere else. Let's just take and implement what you already know and what you do well and make it work for your relationship and your family. That's awesome. Do you have another tip for us?
Sure, I have many. So
awesome.
You can speak on this all day.
Pretty much. Another thing is having understanding and compassion and understanding your limitations. So obviously as a couple you want to have those already in place. A lot of times what I find is when service members retire, they lose a sense of identity. And it's very hard for the partner to connect on that. So you have to have a sense of understanding and compassion. And then at the same time, know when it's time to seek outside resources, especially when you're dealing with issues of PTSD. I understand that you become very introverted and you feel like you can handle it on your own with your spouse, but you always have to know, okay, this is becoming out of hand. We need to seek additional resources to help.
Can you share a little bit about what PTSD is, what that means for our audience in case they don't know?
So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. It tends to happen a lot of times when service members come back from deployment. It's very political, but I'll try not to get too in here. So what happens is a lot of times when service members do seek help with TRICARE, TRICARE is a great resource. Unfortunately, because it's insurance-based, a lot of times their commanders or higher-ups get a hold of that information, and sometimes, you know, they're released from the military because of it, and it's understandable for safety reasons. So then they lose that sense of identity and that sense of placement, and then they don't know what to do with their time. And then a lot of times, especially July 4th, is a big trigger with the fireworks and the noises and everything like that. So that creates triggers, that creates memories that are not necessarily present, and they become back in that battle zone. So they're completely immersed in that environment because they have specific triggers, which becomes safety issues. You become very introverted because you don't want to have triggers. So you're like, okay, I'll stay home. This is my safety zone.
Right, to avoid.
Right. So a lot of times, EFT is a great resource for people who have PTSD.
And what's EFT?
Sorry, emotionally focused therapy is a great resource because you learn how to connect with your partner, create that safety zone for them, which is always a great resource for couples to create that safety zone and letting them know that it's okay.
Great.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of these great tips. I've actually learned so much in just sitting here this short time with you, and I know Katie and I both are honored that you are our guest today to talk about, you know, military families and couples in particular. Can you tell our audience a little bit about how they can reach you?
Sure. So I have my own private practice in Coral Springs and Plantation called Cloud9 Therapeutic Services. You can visit my website at cloud09therapy.com or call me.
Okay. And do you have anything that you'd like to offer to the audience that are watching today, in particular military couples?
So as an added bonus and added discount for the service, I do add a discount for military members on their first session because I understand that it is a needed resource. So for me, it's more about providing that service.
And who better than to work with a therapist who specializes in couples and actually has that experience
Right.
of being part of a military family.
Yeah.
So she really understands a lot of probably what you guys are going through, your families are going through, things like that.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here, Jessica. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I know our audience really got a lot out of listening to you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And thank you guys again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Couples Corner. Again, I'm Katie Lemieux.
And I'm Susan Block, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.